You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
Most writers and radio show hosts know that to connect with your fans, you need to do more than just write books or record the latest podcasts. There are many different elements that go into forming an online platform, but there are also many hidden traps. To make matters worse, solid advice on how to survive the muddy waters is scarce. In the book Hidden Traps, I talk about some of the important issues of working with an online platform, highlighting traps that could put your physical or internet security at risk or be harmful to your reputation. Are your social media posts just links with a few disjointed words, making you look like someone who can't complete a sentence? Did your new website cost you more than you anticipated? Are you leaking your personal contact details across the web without even knowing it? Then you need Hidden Traps. Hidden Traps is now available in paperback and ebook from a variety of retailers, including Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Kobo. Visit blackwolfpublications.com for more details.
Do you need a car? Been shopping only to be turned down because of bad credit, low credit, no credit, bankruptcy, or divorce? Guess what? Today's your lucky day, because now you can buy a car, truck, or SUV, just about any vehicle. It's true. Bad credit doesn't matter. No credit doesn't matter. Bankruptcy or divorce, it just doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, your job is your ticket to your new vehicle. We're Auto Credit Express, and we've helped thousands of people just like you. Antonio H. told us, great company, got me connected, and the day I went in, I drove off in the car I wanted. 100% worth your time. Need a car? Get started now and drive off as early as today. Just text FINANCE, F-I-N-A-N-C-E, to 357-911 right now to get started. That's FINANCE, F-I-N-A-N-C-E, to 357-911. Auto financing the easy way. Text FINANCE to 357-911.
KLRN Radio has advertising rates available. We have rates to fit almost any budget. Contact us at advertising@klrnradio.com.
Everyone loves liberty. Our rights come from God, not the government. So why are you letting other people tell you what's best for your health care? Exercise your freedom with Liberty Health Share. Liberty Health Share is a community of people who voluntarily share one another's medical costs. Liberty Health Share is founded on the idea that most people truly want to help one another. Healthcare sharing allows members to do just that as a true community that supports one another in times of need. Liberty believes people should make decisions for themselves and their families. Members are able to take back the freedom to make their own decisions about their health care. Freedom from guilt or doubt about how your money is used. You have the freedom to direct your health care, not to be dictated to by bureaucrats. Stop letting others tell you what to do and join a community of like-minded people. Exercise your freedom. Join Liberty Health Share and take back the control of your health care while helping those around you. Call Liberty at 855-58-LIBERTY. Again, that's 855-58-LIBERTY for more information, or you can check them out at libertyhealthshare.org. Again, that's libertyhealthshare.org.
My son was in the Army back during Desert Storm, but even then he wanted an MBA. He looked at a dozen schools, but only one offered the online education and flexibility he needed while he was in a tent in Iraq. Grantham University. Turns out that Grantham's been delivering affordable, relevant college and advanced degrees for over 65 years. Heck, if they can deliver a quality education to a soldier in a tent overseas, think about the flexibility Grantham can offer you so you can earn your degree too. It doesn't matter how complicated or full your life is. If getting a degree is on your bucket list, you'll want to do what my son did. You'll want to call Grantham. Find out how easy it is to get started on your education so you can check that college degree off your bucket list. Call Grantham right now, 800-910-1370. That's 800-910-1370. Flexible, affordable, relevant. Call 800-910-1370.
At St. Jude, a family never sees a bill at all. It's like the world has been lifted off of your shoulders.
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Sometimes writers feel lost, unsure why a passage may not be working. It takes another set of eyes to help us nurture our writing into full maturity. At Black Wolf Editorial Services, we strive to enable writers to develop and grow, offering manuscript critiques and line edits through a mentoring editorial style. We also offer assistance on generating a writer's bio for your websites. Black Wolf Editorial Services, nurturing your writing into maturity. For a full list of services, visit blackwolfeditorial.com.
You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
Hello everyone and welcome back to The Lone Conservative. This is the fifth take for the intro. I'm terrible at introductions, I'm sorry. This is one of the reasons why I don't do shows live, okay? Listen, the past 5 intros have just been full of corny jokes or terrible, hello there, everyone's. And I want to get this one right. And if this one is somehow right, I really feel bad for now at this point wasting 32 seconds of your time complaining about how I wanted to get it right so bad. But today we've got a really good episode planned. Now, even though there's not as much drama this week, there's still been some big things going on, but let's face it, the national scorn and anger and reality level drama is not as high as it has been in recent weeks. For one, the Kavanaugh drama is finally over, which is rather nice. I mean, listen, the Kavanaugh issue was exciting to talk about. It was exciting, albeit infuriating, to see unfold. But I'm glad we can move past it because I really did not want to spend another episode covering Kavanaugh as much as I love Mr. Kegstand. Now, a really quick kind of explanation before we get into today's episode. So this episode is airing first today on KLRNRadio. The kind folks at KLRN, which is a conservative internet radio station for the people who usually listen on Mondays, has agreed to host our show from 9 to 10 p.m. on Sundays, which is, just an exciting opportunity. Like, I freaked out when I first got the opportunity, when they first said that they would host the show, because I'm glad we're kind of expanding a little bit. I'm glad that KLRN is giving us the chance here, and I'm just really, really appreciative to everyone who's helped me get this opportunity and who has given me the opportunity to be on KLRN. So for those of you who are listening right now on KLRN, we usually release episodes every Monday in the afternoon or in the evening, SoundCloud, Google Play, Apple Podcasts. If you like me, if you love me, feel free to go over there and drop a 5-star review on Apple. It helps. And people who usually listen on Monday who are going to be hearing this episode about a day later, know that if you want to hear us from a little bit early and you have the time, feel free to come and listen to us on KLRN Radio. We'd really appreciate it. And before I bore all of you to death, let's just do what I do every episode and jump right into it. Because in the wise words of Mickey Mouse, oh boy, we've got a lot to get into today. So the first thing I wanted to go over today, and it's kind of recent drama. This is one of the reasons why I like recording on Sundays, because all the really big political pundits haven't really covered issues unless they're just tweeting about it. And the one, the only, the OG, Ben Shapiro, is on Shabbat. So he isn't going to be covering these issues, which is, it's going to be very nice to get to it first. And now not just to get to it first, but to have their vocal opinion on it first. That's going to be awesome. But the first thing I wanted to get to today was the recent drama around President Trump supposedly praising Robert E. Lee. So, for those of you who haven't heard, you must be living under a rock. Basically, President Trump was holding one of his famous Trump rallies in Lebanon, Ohio. And in the middle of this rally, I did not watch the whole thing. Now, keep in mind, I have watched the supposed comments he made on Robert E. Lee, but I didn't watch the whole rally because I'm not gonna do that. I'm sorry, I'm not really a watch the rally on television kind of guy. But essentially, NBC was the one who really sparked this drama. And NBC tweeted out this out-of-context tweet about 2 days ago saying, quote, "Watch, President Trump says Robert E. Lee was a great general during Ohio rally, calling the Confederate leader incredible." So, what did Trump say? And was this tweet from MSNBC justified? Well, number one, no, it wasn't. They took Trump's speech completely out of context, and it's rather ridiculous, if we're being honest. NBC even knew the mistake they made because they kind of received a huge amount of backlash from it and issued a correction. But along with the tweet, they posted an out-of-context video clip, and I wanted to play that for all of you today. So let's just listen to it, and also this is exciting because it's the first time we're actually playing a video clip on the podcast. So let's take a listen.
It also gave you a general who was incredible. He drank a little bit too much. You know who I'm talking about, right? So Robert E. Lee was a great general. And Abraham Lincoln developed a phobia. He couldn't beat Robert E. Lee. He was going crazy. I don't know if you know this story, but Robert E. Lee was winning battle after battle after battle, and Abraham Lincoln came home. He said, I can't beat Robert E. Lee. And he had all of these generals. They looked great. They were the top of their class at West Point. They were the greatest people. There's only one problem. They didn't know how the hell to win. They didn't know how to fight. They didn't know how.
Okay, so if you hear that, then you may think that, yes, Trump was talking about Robert E. Lee. Yes, Trump was the one who was calling Robert E. Lee a great general. There's only two issues with this. Number one, even from that out-of-context clip, you can tell that at the very least, there's one thing that gives away that he's not talking about Robert E. Lee, and that's when he says he maybe drank too much. Robert E. Lee did not have reputation, as a little history lesson to the people out there who obviously don't know what context is. Robert E. Lee did not have a reputation as an alcoholic. He was not known as a drunk. He was not known as someone who frequently drank too much. Ulysses S. Grant, on the other hand, while a fabulous and amazing general, was known as an alcoholic. The people around him who attested to it said that he was likely an alcoholic. He did have a reputation for drinking too much. He did have a reputation for squandering his money on alcohol. So the first thing is, if Trump is praising Robert E. Lee and he's saying it also gave you a great general, he maybe drank too much, that doesn't make any sense. Robert E. Lee didn't have that reputation. There's no reason Trump would say that, and you can say, well, Trump's just dumb, because a lot of people try to say that Trump's just an idiot and he doesn't know his stuff. But even though Trump goes off the cuff a lot of these times at these rallies, he does usually plan what he is going to talk about. And that's something that's very easy to research. That's something very easy for his staff to tell him whether it's true or not. So, I mean, that's the first thing that kind of gave away he wasn't talking about Robert E. Lee in terms of how great a general he was. And by the way, yes, he does call Robert E. Lee a good general in the sense that he says Abraham Lincoln kind of had a phobia about not being able to beat him. That's true. There's evil people in history who were brilliant strategic minds. Erwin Rommel comes to mind, the Desert Fox. You can say that someone is a brilliant strategist, a brilliant mind in the art of warfare, while also saying that they aren't a good person. There's been tons of evil people throughout history who have been amazing at warfare and are overall garbage people. So that's one thing, but the media is acting like Trump is worshiping at the altar of Robert E. Lee, that Trump is saying that Robert E. Lee is a good person, and NBC wasn't the only one getting at this. So there were other people tweeting and posting articles, outlets and people alike, saying that Trump was worshiping at the altar of Robert E. Lee or unnecessarily praising Robert E. Lee, and I'll read a few of those to you right now. So Brent Griffiths posted on Twitter, quote, "So Robert E. Lee was a great general and Abraham Lincoln developed a phobia. He couldn't beat Robert E. Lee. Trump in Ohio tonight." So he's basically quoting Trump and then saying Trump in Ohio tonight. Again, trying to further that narrative that Trump was praising Robert E. Lee as some magnificent, glorious general. You had Brian Tyler Cohen. Oh my gosh, I'm getting tongue twisted today. You had Brian Tyler Cohen, who I don't know how big of a personality he is, but he had a rather viral tweet, so I'm going to read it. He says, quote, "Trump's now pandering so shamelessly to Confederate idiots that he's actually praising the incredible Confederate General Robert E. Lee at an Ohio rally. Fun fact, Ohio was in the Union. There was not even one person booing him off the stage. Speaks volume about these patriots." Number one, oh my God. I'm sorry, the stupidity in that tweet. let's go over a few things. Number one, the reason he specifically brought up Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant, the rivalry between the two. So he was putting Robert E. Lee off as a great general to show that Ulysses S. Grant was even greater, to show how amazing Ulysses S. Grant is. And Trump has this habit at rallies, as literally all politicians do. And I'm someone who vastly criticizes Trump, but literally all politicians do this. Trump has a habit at rallies of picking something specific to the state that he's in or the area that he's in, something that they're proud of, and praising it to the stars. In this case, and usually it's not an unjust praise. In this case, he chose Ulysses S. Grant. Why? Because Ulysses S. Grant is from Ohio. Ulysses S. Grant was an Ohio native. That's why he was talking about Ulysses S. Grant. He knows that Ohio is in the Union. He wasn't praising Robert E. Lee to the stars. He was praising Ulysses S. Grant. He was praising Ulysses S. Grant by saying Robert E. Lee was an amazing tactical mind. Ulysses S. Grant was greater and was able to beat him. That's what he was using Robert E. Lee's greatness as a strategic mind, not as a good person, as a strategic mind, saying that no other general could beat him to qualify the greatness of Ulysses S. Grant. So that's just absolutely ridiculous. But then you had more idiocy from other outlets who posted things like, and I'm going to read a few of these. CNN posts, Robert E. Lee was a great general. That was the title of their article. MSNBC, here's another article they posted. This is an article. What I read was a tweet. This was an article. President Trump praising Robert E. Lee during campaign-style rally. Washington Post, Trump praises Confederate General Robert E. Lee. Time Magazine, Robert E. Lee descendant attacks President Trump's comments on Lee. I think the title gets cut out a little bit. I believe that's what it said. Either way, it says attacks President Trump's comments on ... You can assume it's Robert E. Lee. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And by the way, the descendant of Robert E. Lee who came out attacking President Trump's statements, from what I read of that Time article, he was bringing in the argument that some people on the right used, that the Civil War was over states' rights rather than slavery, when President Trump literally said nothing of the sort. He was not justifying the Civil War from the Confederate perspective. He was praising Ulysses S. Grant. The outrage over this is something to behold, and it's something that's completely out of the realm of reason. It's absolutely idiotic. And you want to know why it's absolutely idiotic? You want to know how you know it's stupid? The outrage doesn't mean anything? Well, when MSNBC was receiving some backlash for taking Trump's speech out of context, they quickly posted about 2 days, actually not quickly, about 2 days later. About 2 days later, they posted, when no one's going to care anymore, they posted a correction with the full in-context video. So let's take a listen to that, and let's hear what Trump was actually saying. Was he categorically praising Robert E. Lee to the stars, or was this actually a praise of Ulysses S. Grant? Let's take a listen to MSNBC's updated in-context clip.
Maybe someday he will. It also gave you a general who was incredible. He drank a little bit too much. You know who I'm talking about, right? So Robert E. Lee was a great general. And Abraham Lincoln developed a phobia. He couldn't beat Robert E. Lee. He was going crazy. I don't know if you know this story. But Robert E. Lee was winning battle after battle after battle, and Abraham Lincoln came home. He said, I can't beat Robert E. Lee. And he had all of these generals. They looked great. They were the top of their class at West Point. They were the greatest people. There's only one problem. They didn't know how the hell to win. They didn't know how to fight. They didn't know how. And one day, it was looking really bad. And Lincoln just said, you hardly knew his name. And they said, don't take him. He's got a drinking problem. And Lincoln said, I don't care what problem he has. You guys aren't winning. And his name was Grant, General Grant. And he went in and he knocked the hell out of everyone. And you know the story. They said to Lincoln, you can't use him anymore. He's an alcoholic. And Lincoln said, I don't care if he's an alcoholic. Frankly, Give me 6 or 7 more just like him. He started to win. Grant really did. He had a serious problem, a serious drinking problem. But man, was he a good general. And he's finally being recognized as a great general. But Lincoln had almost developed a phobia because he was having a hard time with a true great fighter and a great general, Robert E. Lee. But Grant figured it out. And Grant is a great general, and Grant came from right here. Ulysses S. Grant.
Would you take a listen to that racist crowd? How dare they? How dare they cheer for the Union? How dare President Trump? How dare he praise one of the greatest generals to ever live? How dare he? How dare those people? Listen to them. They're not even stopping him. They're not stopping him from praising Ulysses S. Grant. How dare these people? So you see, this is just another symptom of left-wing outrage over literally nothing. It's the mainstream media's dishonesty in taking things out of context because they want to land punches on Trump. Because this is one of the things that's so good about Trump, and this is one of the things that among critics and fans alike, he is regularly praised for, is that he is a counterpuncher, that he hits back, that he's not going to take crap. And, you see that in one of the tweets that he released after this incident. So I'm going to quote this tweet to you because I like it. It's true. He's 100% right. So this is what Trump tweeted after the whole MSNBC controversy. Quote, NBC News has totally and purposely changed the point and meaning of my story about General Robert E. Lee and General Ulysses Grant. Was actually a shout out to Warrior Grant and the great state in which he was born. As usual, dishonest reporting, even mainstream media embarrassed, and as they should be. As they should be. They should be embarrassed, because the reason I went over how Trump is a counterpuncher is this has driven the mainstream media and the left up a wall. And listen, I think sometimes Trump's counterpunching hurts him. I think sometimes it helps him. I think sometimes he punches and he goes in too hard when he shouldn't. And a lot of the other times when the mainstream media takes things out of context, when mainstream left-wing pundits lie about him, when he just has to deal with left-wing Democratic mainstream media BS left and right. The counterpunching is justified, and this has driven the mainstream media up a wall to the point where they're trying to pin Trump for anything they can pin him for. To the point where they create a whole national news cycle. They create a whole story out of literally nothing. And this wasn't even a case of where there is a slight issue and the mainstream media blows it out of proportion, which there have been several in the Trump administration. This is the case in which they take a nothing story, a story of Trump praising the Union, praising Ulysses S. Grant in his defeat of Robert E. Lee. And they take that and they twist it to make Trump fans, and you heard some of the tweets I read, the left does this in general, the mainstream media takes something out of context, they twist it to mean something it doesn't, and then the left uses that out of context quote to accuse the right of being racist. Like that tweet I read before where the guy's like, oh look, none of them try to stop him, no one's booing him throughout that whole thing. Why would they? Why would they? He's talking about Ulysses S. Grant. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. It's like you can't praise General Eisenhower for his World War II victory over the Nazis, despite the fact, and listen, Hitler did a lot of things to hinder Nazi general strategic brilliance, but you can't praise Eisenhower's brilliance in defeating already brilliant Nazi generals, because you can't say that anyone bad is at all smart. Bad people can be smart. Smarter, good people defeat them. You praise the smarter, good people for defeating a formidable foe. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And, there's going to be some people saying, well, the mainstream media always makes mistakes. There's always going to be, no one's perfect. At least they corrected it. And listen, I'm one of the people, by the way, who defends the mainstream media all the time when people call them purely fake news. Purely fake news. I'm one of the people that says, listen, the mainstream media's framing of a story may be bad. What the mainstream media chooses to cover over other things is bad. But the information they report itself is usually true. And when they report incorrect information overall, they usually very quickly correct it. I've defended the mainstream media on that scope. So for anyone who tries to call me some MAGA shill when I was never Trumper during the general election, and I'm someone who avidly defends the overall accuracy and legitimacy of the mainstream media, but I'll say this. It took NBC, I said this a little like maybe 5 minutes ago. It took NBC 2 days. I was about to say 20 minutes because the podcast is hitting 20 minutes right now. But it took MSNBC 2 days to correct something that if they really cared about it, if this had been Obama and they'd if this were Obama, they wouldn't have twisted the story to mean something it didn't. But let's say they did. If this had been Obama or some prominent left-wing politician, they would have corrected it within the hour. It took them 2 days to correct this. 2 days, and after that 2 days, after that correction's already made, most people have already forgotten about it. The damage was done. They got their little blow in that they wanted to get in. So for people who are going to defend MSNBC here, NBC, I guess, by saying, oh, well, they corrected it, they changed their information, they didn't stick with the lie. Okay, but they stuck with it just long enough that now it doesn't matter anymore that they corrected it. It really doesn't. I mean, maybe a little bit. Maybe there's some politically in touch people who, I don't know, just paid attention to MSNBC's tweet before, and then they pay attention to their correction 2 days later. But the overall American populace, it's the news cycle is in one ear, out the other. So they're not going to listen. They're not going to care about this. Most people probably aren't going to know this. And how I know most people aren't going to know this is the mainstream media and prominent left-wingers have made incorrect claims before that there have been corrections issued on, and they've still stuck. The claims have still stuck. They're still a prominent talking point. So I can guarantee you there's still a bevy of people out there who, if you get into a political discussion with them or a political argument with them, this is just going to be something they add to their ammo bag. Well, Trump praised Robert E. Lee, and everyone cheered for him. How can you say he's not a racist? It's at this point, I'm someone who, if you ask people who know me, if you ask people around me on politics, on most issues, but especially politics, I'm usually rather mellow. Now, I'll admit I wasn't mellow on the Kavanaugh stuff because it wasn't just normal politics. It was literally trying to destroy a man's life and his family over uncorroborated allegations. But overall, I'm a pretty mellow guy. But at this point, this is just getting ridiculous. I mean, it has been ridiculous, but now it's getting rather infuriating. The twist and the spin that the mainstream media puts on everything. And that whenever you correct them, whenever you justly call one of their stories fake news, which I think that's I think that's overused. I think it's overused to say that everything the mainstream media reports that you don't like, that isn't politically expedient, isn't true. But when something is legitimately quote-unquote fake news and you call it out, you're just called some anti-media fascist. It's getting to the point where the divide is growing too big, and the mainstream media, despite the fact, again, before you have anyone out there who's saying, oh my god, he's saying shut down the media, despite the fact that I think they have every right to say what they say, despite the fact that, you know, you can't sue the mainstream media for libel, for lying about the president or his intentions, or any politician for that matter. At the end of the day, it's still a despicable practice, and at the end of the day, anyone who calls the mainstream media some objective arbiter of truth is out of their mind. All right. Now, for the people who are just listening on KLRN, I am known. You can ask anyone who has listened before this show is on the radio. I am known for my amazing, fantastic, magnificent segues. I am known for my ability to seamlessly transition from one issue to an unrelated issue. And here it is right now. It's time for an amazing Eric Schaefer Lone Conservative Podcast segue. So the second thing that I wanted to really talk about today is Beto O'Rourke. Gosh, that name is a tongue twister. Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke recently, it was reported that in this last quarter, he received $38.1 million. $38.1 million, and that apparently brings his campaign's total fundraising amount to $62 million. Now, let's look at Ted Cruz in comparison. Ted Cruz in comparison only made around $12 million last quarter. And by the way, by most standards, $12 million is really good. But when your opponent's making $38.1 million, You have some catching up to do. You have some catching up to do. And to put into kind of perspective how much this is, because I know it's already 62 million sounds like a lot. It is. But just to put in perspective how much this is, especially for political fundraising, Beto O'Rourke has outraised Hillary Clinton's 2006 re-election campaign. She raised $52 million. And, the fact that he's raising so much money, the fact that he's raising more than national candidates even raised. Like, for example, he's raised more money than Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush did. Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush did during the GOP primary campaign in 2016. But O'Rourke is essentially taking this as a sign, or he's saying that it's a sign that people are fed up with Republicans in Texas, that there's a lot of grassroots energy in Texas, Democratic grassroots energy in Texas. So according to Washington Post, Beto O'Rourke said this, quote, "In a video to supporters Friday, O'Rourke touted his fundraising as a sign of the strong support he has from Texas voters, who have not elected a Democrat to the Senate since Lloyd Benson in 1988. And so, to put that into context, if Rourke wins here, if Rourke somehow defeats Ted Cruz, this is the first time in around 2 decades that Texas will elect a Democrat to the Senate. Now, that's rather insane. But here's the thing about Beto O'Rourke, and here's the dirty little secret. That, I gave a little dirty secret last week in politics that impeachment doesn't work. Because for context, you always hear the Democrats talking about impeaching Trump, impeaching Kavanaugh. They act like impeachment is some surefire way to get a political opponent out of power. The dirty little secret I gave last week is that impeachment doesn't work. The dirty little secret that I'm going to give this week, okay, is Beto O'Rourke isn't going to win. I know, crazy, right? It's crazy. Beto O'Rourke isn't going to win. You wouldn't know that if you listen to the mainstream media. You wouldn't know that if you listen to a lot of left-wing pundits. But Beto O'Rourke, you'd really think that he had a fighting chance. And for a while, to be fair, it did look like he had a slight fighting chance, but he ain't going to win. Now, granted, he is outperforming a lot of Democrats of elections past, but he's not going to beat Ted Cruz. So let's look at a few polls here, or a few poll averages. So 538's poll average, which really doesn't include any right-wing, what is considered right-wing pollsters. 538's polling average has Ted Cruz 6.2 points ahead. The Real Clear Politics poll average, which does include some right-wing pollsters, has Cruz 7 points ahead. And I'm not saying that Beto O'Rourke may not outperform past Democratic candidates. He probably will. But he ain't going to win. And anyone who's telling you who is going to win it, or that he is going to win it, is selling you snake oil. Because I'm gonna let you in on another little dirty secret. The Democrats have done this before. This has happened before. This happened in 2017 with Jon Ossoff. I'm sorry. You remember when he ran for Georgia's 6th congressional district against Karen Handel. And for anyone who doesn't remember that, basically Jon Ossoff, for a congressional campaign, was raising record amounts. He basically had a total of $32 million at his disposal from both outside fundraising groups, individual donations, PACs, and the Democratic Party itself. He had $32 million at his disposal. In a Georgia district, people were saying this was a referendum on Trump. It was in a district in Georgia that Trump barely won. Now, granted, Trump barely won it, but it had been strongly red in terms of Congress for a very, 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 very long time. But still, Trump barely won that district. Ossoff had $32 million at his disposal. He was running against Karen Handel. He still lost in the final results by 4 points. 4 points. So the left has this habit of at the very least in 2017, 2016, more 2017, 2018, they have this habit of building candidates up on a national level. Specifically candidates, I'll give Beto O'Rourke and Jon Ossoff this, specifically candidates who are charming, who are likable, who people can really connect to, At the very least in New York and California and more liberal states, people who people can really connect to. They raise these people up. They act like they have a snowball's chance in hell of winning. They pump a lot of money, both in-state and out-of-state, into their campaigns. And then, again, despite the fact that these people perform better than they usually would, because unlike most congressional candidates, like John Ossoff was getting not only a record amount of money, but he was getting a record amount of TV coverage. But despite the fact that they pump these candidates up, and despite the fact that these candidates are still very likable in these red districts, they still lose. And this has kind of been a Democratic strategy. They try to say things are a referendum on Trump. They pump up candidates. The candidates barely lose, despite the fact that monetarily they have a huge advantage. And then, despite the fact that they lost, the Democrats will say, well, this was still a referendum on Trump. It was still really close. Now, again, Beto O'Rourke, I've said this 2 times, I'll say it again. Beto O'Rourke is outperforming Democrats of Texas past. But he ain't gonna win. Ben Shapiro has basically had a really solid take on this, and I totally agree with it. If Beto O'Rourke were to win this race, he ain't gonna be in the Senate for that long. Within 2 years, he's gonna be running for president. Because that would just make him a star. Like a movie star among Democrats. But there's a few reasons why Beto O'Rourke probably isn't going to win. One is the fact that in each meeting that he and Ted Cruz have had, in the debates that they've had, Ted Cruz shellacks him. And despite the fact, like you'll see this in presidential debates, that it's usually after the first or second debate, most people have made up their minds already. I mean, most people have their minds made up beforehand, but the undecideds have their minds made up after the first or second debate. So Ted Cruz, debates are rather essential to elections, and Ted Cruz has just shellacked him in the confrontations they've had. But the other thing that Beto O'Rourke is facing right now, that's probably going to lead to him not winning, is the fact that he had a DWI in 1998. So basically, O'Rourke, this is how the DWI went. So in 1998, O'Rourke was driving with a .134 to .136 alcohol level, blood alcohol content. So O'Rourke was apparently, according to a witness, going at a very, very fast speed down the highway. Again, keep in mind, this is on a highway that has a 75 mile per hour speed limit, and this witness said that he was going insanely fast. O'Rourke slams into a truck, and according to witness testimony, he tried to leave the scene, and that's the really important thing. Because there have been politicians in the past who have, people have gone after them for using drugs. They've gone after them for excessive alcohol use. They've gone after them for DUIs or DWIs. A candidate that comes to mind is George W. Bush. George W. Bush, people really went after him because George W. Bush, I forget what year this was in, but I believe it was around the 1970s. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact date of George W. Bush's DUI, but George W. Bush was pulled over on a DUI with a blood alcohol content of 0.10 or 0.1. Now, before I continue, I want to say, it's despicable. It doesn't necessarily make you a bad person, but you are committing a despicable, vile, selfish act if you drunk drive, if you go drunk driving. It's really gross. It's bad no matter who does it. But, just like we quantify it in the courts with murder, like premeditated murder is you would consider morally worse than just heat of the moment murder. Both are evil acts, both are disgusting acts. But one of them requires a sense of planning, emotionlessness, and want to kill. A greater want to kill. The planning is the really disturbing part about premeditated murder over you just snapping and doing it in the heat of the moment. Again, both are bad, one is worse than the other. Same thing applies with Beto O'Rourke and George W. Bush, and the reason why I bring up George W. Bush is in response to Republicans going after Beto O'Rourke, people are trying to compare Beto O'Rourke's DWI to George W. Bush's DUI. When, it's the same in the sense that they drove under the influence, it's not the same in how it happened. So let's go over the difference, the really big, the fundamental difference here. Beto O'Rourke, after he, crashed into a truck on the highway, tried, according to witnesses, or people who were there, tried to leave the scene. In an Anthony Police Department report on the incident, A witness basically said that O'Rourke tried to leave, and that the person he ran into, whose truck he slammed into, essentially stopped him from leaving. And when they were asked to, the Anthony Police Department basically confirmed the account and the report's authenticity. So it's pretty much 100% that this happened. That Beto O'Rourke not only drove well over the legal limit. Again, Bush drunk drove, but it's .1 is not .136. He was driving well above the legal limit. He slammed into someone, and then he tried to flee. Basically a hit and run. But not only did he just try and leave, Beto's also trying to deny that he ever did this. So he says, quote, "I did not try to leave the scene of the accident. Though driving drunk, which I did, is a terrible mistake for which there is no excuse or justification or defense, and I will not try to provide one. I can only tell you that I was able to have a second chance in my life." Which, he said this during a debate with Ted Cruz, I believe, which sounds like a good statement. It sounds like someone who's genuinely regretful, except for the fact that if you're not willing to own up to the full harshness of the mistake, then you obviously are, to some extent, trying to excuse it, trying to mitigate what you did. Now, here's the difference between, and again, the witness report, the police report on the incident in terms of Beto trying to leave was fully, it's been authenticated. Now, what's the difference here between George W. Bush? Well, not only was George W. Bush pulled over with a lower blood alcohol content of .1, the police also said, when the media was trying to find things on George W. Bush's incident, the police said that, unlike Beto O'Rourke, who tried to flee the scene, George W. Bush was fully cooperative. The officer on the scene said George W. Bush did nothing but cooperate. He didn't try to leave. He didn't try to flee. He cooperated with police commands. So there's the big difference there. Is at the very least when George Bush did something that was stupid and idiotic, that could have gotten someone hurt or killed, just like Beto, at the very least George W. Bush faced the music. He didn't try to run in his drunken state. He faced the music. He listened to the police officer. And along with that, he received a punishment. He was fined $150 by the court, and he had his driving privileges suspended in Maine. What did Beto O'Rourke get? Because Bush was just, to the best of my knowledge, from what I'm seeing, is basically Bush was pulled over near his parents' home. He didn't slam into anyone. He was pulled over. He didn't reckon anyone. On the other hand, Beto O'Rourke crashed into someone, tried to flee. When he went to court, didn't face a fine, didn't get his driving privileges suspended. Basically, in all honesty, got off scot-free. All he had to do was face a court-approved diversion program. That was it. And it's suspected that because his father was a judge in El Paso and his family was rather politically connected, that was one of the reasons why he got off with such a light sentence. We'll never, or El Paso County, I should say. We don't know that for sure. That one is just pure speculation from the right, but it's not the craziest thing to ever be heard. And when the mainstream media reports on the Bush, not just the mainstream media, but when left-wing pundits talk about the Bush incident compared to the O'Rourke incident, they say, well, Bush was pulled over for a DUI, and it really didn't hurt his chances. It didn't hurt his election. The main difference is, and it's been pointed out by a lot of right-wing pundits, the main difference between the Bush incident and the O'Rourke incident is that Beto O'Rourke came much, 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 much closer to causing death. And at the very least did cause destruction. Bush didn't do any, and again, Bush could have, he was driving drunk, could have, but he didn't do any such thing. And despite the fact that he was driving drunk, he was, if we're speaking realistically, less likely to do so. Your body and your motor skills are much more impaired at a blood alcohol content level of 0.36, or 0.136, sorry, at 0.136 than they are at 0.10. There is a big difference there. So, and by the way, there is a reason why some people on the right are suspecting this could do at least some damage to Beto's campaign. Because number one, there wouldn't, if Beto O'Rourke didn't think this was going to do much damage, if his campaign didn't think this was going to do much damage, there'd be no reason for him to deny that he tried to flee the scene. He'd own up to it, be an adult about it, and say, I did a bad thing, a very bad thing. I feel I faced the music, I've matured since then. But no, there's a reason why Beto tried to deny it in debates. There's a reason why he still denies it. To the best of my knowledge, there's a reason why he still denies it. And there's also a reason why you'll see a lot of outlets try to cover up for him. So PolitiFact, the fair arbiter of truth in the political world, reported on Beto O'Rourke's DUI incident. And not only did they report on the DWI incident, not only did they report on the DWI incident, they also reported on the comments he made in the Cruz debate, saying that he didn't try to flee the scene. So they rated that mostly false. They rated that claim mostly false. So why would they rate it mostly false? Well, let's read kind of PolitiFact's reasoning here. Quote, O'Rourke said he didn't try to leave the scene of his 1998 DWI accident and arrest. Records indicate O'Rourke was arrested at the scene and wasn't charged with trying to flee. But the September 1998 Anthony Police Department report on the incident says a witness said O'Rourke tried to leave the scene before police arrived, and the witness kept him from doing so. That was basically the summing up of the article by PolitiFact. And basically they followed up by saying, so we rate this mostly false. Sounds like that's a pants-on-fire lie. Sounds like that's false. Patently and plainly false. Not mostly false. Not half true. False. But the reason why they rate... Because PolitiFact has a left-wing bend. It's no secret to anyone that PolitiFact has a left-wing bend. And the reason they rated this mostly false is because... most people, they suffer from confirmation bias. I suffer from confirmation bias from time to time. We all do. We all try to find information specifically pertaining to our argument that helps us. And PolitiFact knows this. So they know that if someone who is questionable about Beto O'Rourke, specifically someone who's on the left, if they search this and they see that PolitiFact has rated it mostly false, they're probably not going to read the whole page-and-a-half, 2-page article on it. They're probably just going to take that at face value and say, because usually mostly false means, okay, they're not telling the truth, but the falsity, the amount of falsity that's being stated by the other side on the statement is being blown out of proportion. That's usually what mostly false means. That they're lying, but it's not a huge lie. It's not a flat-out lie. There are some elements of truth. PolitiFact even tried to claim in a 6-page report. They said, here's a 6-page report where there are some elements of truth in O'Rourke's statement. There's no element of truth in the statement they're rating. He said he didn't try to flee the scene. The police report and the witness testimony says he did. A police report that's been authenticated by the police department who issued it. So, again, there's no semblance of truth there. He just flat out lied. And again, the reason they're saying that this was only mostly false is because they're trying to pander to confirmation bias. Because they know, again, that most people aren't going to read that full article. And that's how you know that this could just like the domestic assault allegations against Keith Ellison could damage him. Just like you know that could damage him because the media really hasn't been covering it that intensely, and when they do cover it, they try to make Ellison look in positive. They try to put him in a positive light. Same thing with O'Rourke. When they report on the DWI incident, they say, oh, listen, he did this, but he denies trying to flee the scene. You know, he's grown. He says he's grown up. He says that he regrets it. That's how they report on O'Rourke. Otherwise, they just don't report on it at all. That is one of the telltale signs of how you know something's going to hurt a left-wing candidate, or something could hurt a left-wing candidate. When the mainstream media and a lot of left-wing pundits either don't touch it, or when they do touch it, they try to twist it so the person they're talking about seems somewhat positive. Seems somewhat more grown up. And in all honesty, that's rather despicable. And again, it's just an indicator of the mainstream media's dishonesty. But back to kind of O'Rourke. You know, we see the Democrats and left-wing groups dumping $38 million into this guy. $38 million. Like I said, this is Ossoff all over again. Beto O'Rourke ain't gonna win. And they're just trying to make it seem as if, because listen, again, I know I've said this so many times, but I'm only restating it because it's important. Again, Beto O'Rourke will likely outperform Democrats of Texas past. But they're going to make that overperformance seem as if it's because of some grassroots Democratic upsurgence in Texas, rather than the fact that Beto O'Rourke received more money than Texas senatorial candidates have in the past, and rather than the fact that Beto O'Rourke is getting 2 to 3 times as much press coverage as Texas senatorial candidates right and left in the past, in terms of campaigning. That's why. It's the same thing with Ossoff, and it's happening again with O'Rourke. And they're going to act like the Democratic Party in Texas and the Democratic movement in Texas is stronger than what it actually is. And then after Cruz wins by probably about 5, 6, 7 points, maybe I'm wrong, maybe Cruz will lose, but he's going to probably win by 5, 6, 7 points. Maybe even more. But after Cruz wins by less than Republicans have won in the past, the Democrats are still going to try to play off their loss as a win, because despite O'Rourke receiving more money and more coverage than Senate candidates and Senate candidates past in Texas, they're going to try and play it off as if this is a referendum on Donald Trump. This is a referendum on Trump. This is a referendum on the Republican Party in Texas, and you see blue states starting to shift blue. That's how they're going to play this. Well, Cruz may have lost or won today, but he's going to lose in the war. He's going to lose tomorrow. That's what they're going to play this off as. I can already see it. And anyone with half a brain, independent, right-wing, left-wing, or otherwise, can see through that. They can see through this. Okay, everyone, this has been The Lone Conservative on KLRN. I know, the ending, that's what everyone likes in podcasts. They like an abrupt, random segue. But this has been The Lone Conservative on KLRN, and for the people who are going to be listening tomorrow on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, I don't know. Thank you so much to KLRN for hosting the show. We look forward to seeing you every week from 9 to 10 p.m. We really want you to keep tuning in. And if you have any feedback for how I did, if you have any compliments, criticisms, concerns, please come to me, because I do love to talk about this stuff. I love to improve, and I love to really talk with people either who agree or disagree with me on the issues of the day. I want to hear your opinions. Follow the Lone Conservative Podcast on Twitter for any updates on the podcast at @loco_pod. And of course, follow the amazing outlet which has allowed me to have this podcast in the first place, The Lone Conservative. You can find them on Twitter and Instagram or Facebook. On Facebook, just type in Lone Conservative, you'll find it. On Twitter, it's @LO Conservative. On Instagram, it's @Lone Conservative. So please go follow them there. They're all amazing accounts, especially Twitter and Instagram. They're hilarious. And if you want to hear more from my beautiful self, you can go follow me on Twitter @RealEricSchaefer for also any updates on the podcast and just my amazing takes of the day. Because I'm just an amazing conservative commentator. I'm the best. Thank you so much for listening today, and we'll see you all again next Sunday at 9 p.m. sharp. So make sure to tune in and have a good one.